Hello, let's chat about the first book in the Age of Madness trilogy, A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, a 2019 fantasy novel. This is a follow-on from the first trilogy in this world, the First Law trilogy, which then has several standalone books that come in between that trilogy and this one, this one has all been published, so it's all out there. You don't have to wait to get to the next one, even though I have waited. I've actually waited a while before I actually came and decided to just have a quick chat about this book. So yeah, this trilogy set in sort of the first Law trilogy was most definitely kind of a medieval Europe fantasy world where there was magic, but it had sort of started to fade away into memory, and indeed, certain super powerful magical beings in that world had faded. The idea of demons was seen as sort of just kind of a children's thing, and it was the powers that be's focus in this world was far more on the politics. And this is a world where up north there is the Northmen, kind of the barbarians, probably best typified by Logan Ninefinger, a berserker, and probably the star of the trilogy, probably in my opinion. Well, that or another fellow who was the opposite of Logan Ninefingers. And then at the bottom was the Gurkish Empire, sort of very feeling kind of like Middle East, kind of that kind of vibe. And in between the two, getting squashed and forced to fight two front battle, is the Union, where is very much your kind of knights in shining armor, dueling civilization. It's very much kind of civilized. You have the fancy balls and all this stuff, and it's a union which is very much, though at the height of power, is also weak, and is for all its self-proclaimed superiority, is fallen into kind of dissolution. It's sort of like the Roman Empire. They were hard men at one point, but now the success has softened them, and may perhaps softened them fatally. And that kind of plays out in that book, as well as over top of that, one of these mythic figures reappears. Very genial seeming old man, Baez, who is a wizard, who you get definitely a different view of Baez by the end of those novels. It's sort of like what Gandalf would have been if Gandalf had been written by a grim, dark, realist a writer, and was a little less of just sort of angelic and much more of a super powerful being. And indeed, Baez shows up in these books. Now, these books take place about 20, almost 30 years after the last one. So it's like there's a whole generation. There's a couple of people that are still back around. Baez does show up again. Baez seems to be nigh immortal, like Gandalf. There's Dogman, who is one of Logan Ninefinger's buds in the Northmen. And in the Union, there's a Savine Dan Glokta, who is the daughter of San Dan Glokta, who was probably my other favorite character in the First Law trilogy. This fellow in the Union who started off as just kind of your handsome, super skilled swordsman, kind of he's like awesome guy, but fell and got captured by the Gurkish Empire and was tortured, and his body was completely twisted and ruined. He talks with a lisp because they knocked out every other tooth, and that's sort of the least of what they did to this guy, who is in excruciating pain just to get up off a chair. And he becomes the chief. He becomes a torturer for the Union, and is extremely good at his job because he knows exactly what how this pain affects a person, because he's had it done to himself, and is extremely smart character, and actually, strangely enough, a character that you root for, and you can see is actually maybe actually far more heroic than someone like a Logan Ninefinger. But I won't get into that book. In this book, it is about Savine Danglokdar. There is, I think it's 7 characters. There's Rika, who is the daughter of Dogman. There is Leodan Brock, um, who is kind of an heir to the throne. Savine, Orso, Vic, Broad, and Clover. Clover, a Northman, a genial an old veteran who seems to make a laugh and joke about everything, but that's very much the mask. So there's, in some ways, that this book feels like is are we just kind of going back to the well again with this world? It's a really interesting world, but we're getting like yet again in the north. There's another fellow who has rised up, a Stour Nightfall, who seems to be riling up violent Northmen to do violent Northman stuff again. We don't get any stirrings from the Gurkish Empire, though it seems Baez has been taking care of things in the south, in that area, so you never know what exactly is going on. And Baez doesn't really share stuff because we're all ants to the Baez, and not really what, unless he needs you, you're not going to be there. He is the king, who we know from the last book, is rightfully terrified of him, but it's kind of got a similarities going there. I think the big difference is that this book has the Union kind of going through an industrial revolution, and as a result, there's very much a feel of like kind of fantasy crossed with almost steampunk, or crossed that way. We have factories where the conditions are like, London, like England going through the Industrial Revolution, and the factories are as vile and as horrible as that. I read one of the first kind of factory novels in British literature, done by Fanny Trollope, Michael Armstrong, Factory Boy, and that book, the descriptions, the horrid descriptions that were given in that book from research of the author of actual industrial conditions, is reflected in this book. And there's something in that, like, of combining industrial with fantasy, which really reminds me of kind of a biggie in fantasy, but not a grim dark fantasy, but kind of comic fantasy, which is a Terry Pratchett. And you start getting more and more of a feel that Joe Abercrombie has obviously read his Pratchett and gone, oh, I could do that, but I could do that kind of with my own, a little bit more, less of the comedic tone. Terry Pratchett isn't like silly comedic. He's usually very sharp, satiric comedic, but with definitely a tone of showing, just how horrible this is, Abercrombie doing. And there is something about how a lot of the characters talk in this book, which I don't think I noticed in the first Law trilogy, where you can see characters going like, well, isn't it silly that we're doing this? Or, not just, there's a certain kind of a tone or ways looking at things, which is how Terry Pratchett characters have a tendency to look at things, of, on education, on how society is run, which feels very Terry Pratchett. And coincidentally enough, as I'm thinking this, one of the quotes that comes up in between chapters is a quote from Terry Pratchett, as if Joe Abercrombie is going, yep, that's where this is coming from. So that actually does give it a kind of an interesting additional tone to it, a sardonic tone to go on to some of the kind of the grim dark stuff that maybe violent stuff that you would expect from Joe Joe Abercrombie there. So it's adding a brush, I guess, to his paint thing. It's maybe it feels maybe like this is going to take a couple more books before it gets more kind of incorporated into his own style, and I don't just go. Did Terry Pratchett stop by and just kind of dash off a couple of lines for you there, Joe? It feels kind of that way. I think it's probably for the best there. I think it's not a bad thing. Um, so yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed. Joe Abercrombie is really skilled at writing, kind of adventurous, exciting, thrilling stuff. Good bone crushing kind of hard scenes of violence being committed. Seeing Dogman again, even an old Dogman is awesome. You've got young dudes who are really freaking dumb, and Joe Abercrombie does not let them off the hook. I like that Savine, who is, kind of is at the beginning, is very much, that's the problem when you have successful parents who had a horrible hard time themselves. You can kind of, the kids can get raised in kind of in privilege. And while she's never not smart, she sort of sometimes just fools herself of exactly how much she's in control of stuff or exactly how hard the world is. And it's a good thing in this book that she does get an exposure to that hardness. I mean, some points that kind of it that's the hard thing with a grim dark writer. It's like, are you being sadistic towards your female character there? But um, he does kind of put her through the ringer. I mean, you could also say the same thing about Rika, the daughter of Dogman, who has to kind of flee stuff and is almost violence is almost done to, and holds a grudge against this and wants it taken care of, and is very frustrated when other characters make what's probably what's probably like, smart decisions not to take revenge, when it's like, yeah, I would love to take revenge, but no, this is a smart time to actually be political and think about the long-term circumstances on the wider scale, not just the personal. And she and I like it. I like it when you have a female character who's not like, oh yes, I too can see the long. No, fucking, I'm a human being and I want fucking this guy to die. Is kind of is good, is probably a fair characterization, and makes me believe more in Rika, as the character has been constructed up to this point. So of course she would not forgive. So I'm not overly enthused by this, just because I feel like maybe we're continuing a cycle here with what happened in the first trilogy. It's like, well, is this just going to happen again in this trilogy? But I mean, Joe Abercrombie is so good at doing this stuff that even if he is slightly repeating himself and seems to be borrowing heavily from Terry Pratchett, I don't mind. I think I haven't rushed back to pick up the next books in the series, but I think I will. And continue on. So it's not like oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. I mean, I really like that first. I think I really like that first trilogy. It was so much fun. Logan Nine Fingers and Glockdar, Sandan Glockdar were just, I just thought they were amazingly fun characters. Um, I don't know if we've quite got a replacement for Logan Nine Fingers. I don't think you ever could. And I mean, that's one of the smart things that Joe Abercrombie does in this book, is he doesn't seem to have got a Logan Nine Fingers replacement, which is good. Or maybe the closest he would have is one of his villains, Stour Nightfall, who definitely bears out his villainous by the end of this first book. So I'm interested. I will go on though. So yay Joe Abercrombie. So yeah, those are my thoughts on A Lttl Htrd. All right, more videos later.